Welcome to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers, for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend. What's the solution? So as pet dog trainers, because that's the majority. Would you say that there's more pet dog trainers than there are competitive?
Oh, by
dog trainers?
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's the bread and butter of the dog industry for sure.
It is. What do you think? I know I don't want to dive into like the polarities of methods and all that stuff anymore, because I think we talk about it too much in all the other episodes. But what could we, how could we solve that problem? How could we solve that economical problem? Is it creating clubs where there's smaller memberships? Is it creating more content? Like what is
education? It's education. So this is my mission in life, right? So since I get to access the trainers that are going to go out and access the general public who aren't trainers, right? Then we have a huge opportunity to influence what people think about dog training. And the average person that comes to a dog trainer doesn't understand dog training at all. They don't know what it is. They have all kinds of misconceptions of what's possible, what dogs are, what good training is, what it should look like. TV doesn't help, right? All that kind of stuff. And so people have these misconceptions. So our job as trainers, the trainers that would contact the general public, is to educate them in a broader sense about what dog training is. And we got to pull them this way. It's a process. You have to be involved. I can't train your dog and hand it back to you and then we're done. They're not.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to maintain it. You're gonna have to, and you should like it. We're cheerleaders for getting them excited, like about what dog training is. This is fun. It's super cool. You can have a relationship with a dog that we can't have with any other species. It's ridiculous. They're amazing. And if you dive in, you will be richly rewarded. And so our job is to get them to take their time and participate in the process. So little bits, we all pull it. And if people initially may go, oh, that guy, he couldn't help me. He wanted me to take 6 months to do this. The other trainer said that. But if more and more trainers start giving them the same information, and it
starts becoming the norm.
It pulls the whole culture that way. And better dog training will be available to everyone. And people will really understand what dog training is. Ultimately, right? How long do we all go to school to get even fairly competent at things, right?
Right. It's true. And in a strange way, I kind of just get getting to know a little bit more like your background of animal conservation and all that stuff. It's like that. Would you say this mission in dog training kind of comes back to that intrinsic goal that you had initially that made you want to go back into conserving animals?
Yeah, I think that for sure. There's no doubt. Like my interest in critters in general, like has been there as a little kid. Like I love that, and I hate what we're doing to the natural world, and certainly dogs are part of that. But I think more, it's like anytime you get really into something, right? So anything you're really super passionate about, it's very hard to interact with people who don't care about it, right? And that's what it is. Like you have somebody here, something that you really think is amazing, something that you really care about. And now you have this person that's like, I don't want to know about any of that. No, I don't want to put that much work into it. Just make my dog stop pulling on the leash. Make it
right.
Kind of
thing. It's kind of like, I don't know if you remember. Well, of course you remember. Of course you remember. You were there. But there was a time in dog training in my career, at least, where I'd ask people, what kind of dog do you have? And they'd answer with, it's a rescue. And they'd say the word rescue as if it was a breed. Right. And so there kind of became this vibe socially where it was like, if you weren't rescuing, if you were buying puppies, you're a messed up person. Right. And so that came through, a lot of media and a lot of, social media stuff. And just like the vibe was just created. Rescues are the way to go. If you're not rescuing, you're a jerk. Right. You're a jerk. And always what my goal was try to figure out how can we make, I don't necessarily want to create that type of propaganda for dog training, but to create a societal feeling of like, you're not training your dog. Come on, go train your fucking dog. Like where you get judged for not training your dog. Right. But it seems like it's so normal to not train your dog until they're destroying something, being annoying or being aggressive. Right. And I always tell people, I said, the difference between a good dog and a trained dog, a good dog is just a dog who's not being annoying, aggressive, or destroying anything.
Right.
Like he can do anything else in the world, and he's a good dog, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's all moving in this direction, that we're trying to change the societal thoughts of like, you should train your dog, just like you should send your kid to school. You should, I don't know what's normal for kids. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like,
and it's getting better. You're right. Like it is getting better. More trainers are thinking like this.
mm-hmm.
They're going out to clients. They're not trying to design their programs strictly to compete with the other guy.
Right.
Have the say, oh, this guy says he's got a off leash 3-week inboard, right? And dog fully off leash trained in 3 weeks, and people have stopped saying like, I'm not going to compete with that. Like I'm going to create a program that's right and finds balance and helps people successfully long term, because those people they're going to rely on an endless supply of new clients, because that client's not going to be happy down the road.
Right.
They send the dog, you do that, the dog goes back, they didn't participate in the process at all. It's going to gradually erode, and then 2 years later they're going to say, oh yeah, I paid this guy all this money and look at this dog, right? So unless you get them connected, and people are realizing that, trainers that are out there are realizing that, and they're extending their programs, they're doing good work, they're coming up with hybrid inboard and
private lesson,
including the people in the inboard training, like all that. It's getting better for sure.
Yeah.
And that's our continued mission.
And it's all in efforts to get the involvement of the owner, right?
Yeah,
I think if we can make that that more of that responsibility fall on the owner, then we will be more successful as dog.
And they'll be happy too. Like when they come into a problem, they'll go, "Oh, okay, I think I know what to do here," because they were a participant in the process the whole way along. Right?
It's funny because I've been working on this very recently. I think, you guys talked in the beginning a little bit about COVID has really helped restructure programs that in a lot of ways, from an intellectual standpoint, it's been pretty good. It makes you think, and it makes you get creative. And for me, it really helped because I started my online programs. And so I wrote up my homework and a little PowerPoint, and it does sharpen you a little bit. But there was a dog that I've been talking about for a while now, Milo, the little dog that's so fearful. He barks at airplanes in the sky. I swear he's actually afraid of his own shadow. And that wasn't an exaggeration. And so he's been working with me. I'm going to have him for a total of 4 weeks, and he's now 3 weeks in. And what I've started doing with people is, if the dog's doing, 3 week, 4 week, whatever the case, at about the 2 week mark, I'll bring them in to visit the dog, but we do a lesson. The dog stays with me, but we'll go somewhere, do a little lesson. I'll explain to them some stuff of what the dog's been doing and why and what they're going to be doing. Then for the next lesson, when the dog actually goes home, we dive into the normal fundamentals of, okay, so he's home now, keep your routine in check, make sure that all these things are in order, and then we'll get fancy as we go. And I found that there is actually a lot of value to that. The people feel a little more
the process.
Right, because they go home and really have a week to chew on the information that you gave them. And the dog, it's been very valuable for me, depending on the dog, because of course there are certain behaviors that a dog gives owners that they don't give the trainer. And 2 weeks into the program, we talk about the dog being able to handle certain pressures. Owner comes in and the dog goes, "Oh, you're right, I am protective." So then owner goes home, and I'm left with a dog that still is now showing me a little more of these things so that I can address them more directly now that we've got our foundations in place. And it allows my momentum to stay peaked for the rest of the program. And then the dog goes home looking as solid as possible.
Absolutely. I think that kind of thing is essential. The last inboards that I did before, I obviously don't do them anymore. But at the time, I had factored in client involvement the whole way. So I would take the dog for a week, and then they would come in at the end of the week, and I would show them everything I did during that week. I would literally walk them through. This is how I started this. This is why I'm doing it. Now you try what I'm doing. And then I said, cool, I'll see you next week. I take the dog, I do the next thing. You come in a week later. Here you go. Right.
Very nice.
And then I wouldn't have inboards shorter than 6 weeks.
Nice. Yeah. I'm at a month right now, but I do 6 weeks for really intense cases.
And so even if they didn't do it themselves, they knew what the dog looked like at all those steps. They had participated some, and they had at least an idea of what the process would be like, right?
Well, you know what? And that really shows to the mastery of your skills, because there are so many dog trainers who want to keep it all a secret, or maybe they're ashamed of what they're doing and they don't want to put that in the forefront, So yeah, like that's a skill I had to learn teaching a lot of workshops and group classes. Was like, I need to make sure that my skills are refined, so I don't feel uncomfortable doing them in public.
Isn't that the weirdest thing, that people have that urge to keep things a secret like that?
Yeah. Like I never understood it. There are lots of people that do, and there are people that think, that they're super gifted, they have something special, and they want to maximize what they can get out of it. There aren't any secrets. We're all playing with the same principles, rearranged.
Yeah, right.
There's no new dog training. It's not new.
And a rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Right.
All that stuff's out there. Somebody else is going to innovate off it. You're going to get the feedback from that. Somebody else is going to innovate that, and we all get better as a result of that.
So can I ask you a question then, with exactly that saying, right? A rising tide lifts all boats. I know that it's tough for younger trainers out there who may be listening, and us too even. It's tough to find the time to record your sessions and to make content, but is it not absolutely essential these days, not only to help get information out there, but also I noticed that nothing sharpens you. I learned this little trick in boxing. Nothing sharpens you like watching yourself back, and you're like, oh my God, I made that mistake.
Huge. That's one of the biggest benefits of the online classes that I've done for the students. So I have some where they have to shoot video homework every week, like some live now interactive, but they would get things and they'd have to shoot their video homework. And so what they got at the end of 16 weeks of that kind of thing, or whatever it was going to be, it was their habit to film every time they practiced. So
love that.
Off their phone up every time they went out to practice. And once you learn so much watching yourself back. Right after a training session, turn around and watch yourself back. You can go like, oh yeah, there, I didn't even realize I did that, and I didn't. And so if you can make it a part of your habit, it's a great thing to do.
Yeah, and I've noticed too, when you're watching yourself as opposed to all the other, because there's you online, there's Tyler, there's amazing trainers online, but when it's you in particular making your own mistakes or whatever the case, you have that. Is it first person or third person where the thoughts that are going through your head? Like, it is interesting. I'll watch myself with the same dog today versus yesterday versus the day before, and I noticeably am weaker at something, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was the day that I stayed up till like 2, huh? And so you have insights that you're like, man, it's crazy how much of your active time with hands-on with the dogs revolves around everything else being in sync, and that's, I think, crazy insightful information for younger trainers to keep in mind. Record yourself, watch it back. It will change you for the better.
And keep a training journal too.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. We make all of our long-term students keep training journals. And so you sit down, and at the start of training a dog, you write down everything you hope to do with this dog. Aspirational. Like if everything lands well, this dog is going to be a pet dog. He's going to hang out in my house. He's going to sleep in my bed. We're going to go hiking. I'm going to take up search and rescue and agility or whatever the hell.
I love that.
I'm going to do that.
Put it down, and then make a list of all the behaviors that your dog would have to know and the skills they'd have to have in order to do all those things, right?
So now you're reverse engineering the goal.
So you have a template here of, if I'm going to get here, what would my dog have to know? So you can focus your direction in your training session. So when you go in, you say like, okay, wow, I haven't started this skill. I should start this skill, or whatever that's going to be. And then keep track of everything you do with the dog, like how much exercise, how much you fed it, how long your training sessions were exactly, like how much the dog played with the other dogs that day, and your plan for a training session when you go into it, and then what you actually did. Plans are good as long as you're willing to abandon them when they need abandoning.
True.
And then what you did, and then your impressions afterwards. And if you videotape it too, then that helps you with your impressions of, oh, my dog seemed a little flat today. Well, we took the 10-mile jog this morning, so I probably shouldn't do that before I train on training day, or whatever you're going to be, right?
Right.
And patterns that you won't hold in your head otherwise. You'll look back and you'll notice the things like you said. That was the night I was up too late. That's the night I kept my dog up too late, and he's not in there.
Right.
Whatever that is. And you'll start to recognize those things, and it's helpful. Like there's no way you're holding that all in your head all the time. And especially if you have multiple dogs. So a trainer that's got multiple dogs in for training, like you got to shift gears every time, and that helps you sort of reset where you are with that dog all the time.
Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend. Join us again next week for part 2 of The Art of Teaching with Michael Ellis.